Over here in cleanup mode.
Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to P&P Live. I'm Brad Graham, the co-owner of Politics and Prose, along with my wife, Lissa Muscatine. And we're very pleased to have with us this evening visual artist Nigel Poor and former prisoner turned full-time podcast producer Earlonne Woods to talk about their new book. This is Ear Hustle, Unflinching Stories of Everyday Prison Life. A couple of brief housekeeping notes. First, though, post a question at any point during the event. Just click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screens. And in the chat column, you'll find a link for purchasing copies of This is Ear Hustle. First came the podcast, and now the book. 4 years ago, when Ear Hustle was launched, it became the first podcast created and produced in prison. Set in California's San Quentin State Prison, the critically acclaimed award-winning show looks at the daily lives of those incarcerated and what they experience after getting out. Nigel, who teaches philosophy at California State University, Sacramento, got involved with San Quentin as a volunteer teacher in the Prison University Project. There, in a media lab nearly a decade ago, she met Earlonne, who had been in prison since 1997, serving 31 years to life for attempted second-degree robbery under the state's 3 strikes law. The two worked together initially on a radio program, then decided to try something a little different than traditional journalism. So they entered a podcast contest and won. And so Ear Hustle, named after the prison term for eavesdropping, was born, with the goal of enabling prisoners to speak for themselves and to humanize a largely ignored population. Those familiar with the podcast, the book will be familiar. It covers a number of the same stories and individuals, but with added context about the thinking behind certain interviews and episodes. And it also illuminates the working relationship between Nigel and Earlonne and elaborates on Earlonne's own life before prison and his post-incarceration activism against the 3 strikes law. His sentence was commuted 3 years ago by then California Governor Jerry Brown. Now, Nigel and Earlonne will be in conversation this evening with Lawrence Bartley, the founder and director of News Inside, which is the print publication of the Marshall Project, a nonprofit news organization that covers the U.S. criminal justice system. When he was 17, Lawrence received a sentence of 27 years to life after shooting his gun inside a crowded movie theater on Christmas night in 1990 and killing a 15-year-old bystander. He was released 2 years ago after serving 27 years and 2 months. So Nigel, Earlonne, and Lawrence, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Brad. Hello, Nigel. Hello,
Hey,
Earlonne.
good to see you.
Good to see you both. Good to see you both. I love the Ear Hustle swag in the background with Earlonne. I'm jealous. I love the Ear Hustle swag.
Some of us are wearing it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I don't have as much as I usually have, but I used to have books and all kind of stuff up back there.
Okay, I need some Ear Hustle swag. We
Yes.
gotta talk offline. We gotta talk
Yes.
offline.
Got you.
So let's dive right in. Tell me, how did you two meet?
I'll leave that to you, Nigel.
Oh, you will? Okay. Well, so I started volunteering inside San Quentin Prison in 2011. As Brad said, I was teaching for the Prison University Project, and I enjoyed it so much. I wanted to find other ways to get involved in stuff that was happening in the prison. And so I made my way down to the media center. And San Quentin's unusual in terms of prisons that it actually has a media center where they publish the San Quentin newspaper, where guys work on films. And that's where I met Earlonne. He was working. Were you working, or were you also volunteering down there, Earlonne?
Volunteering.
He was volunteering too. Yeah. So he was, he can tell his part, but he was doing some technical stuff down there. And I was working with some guys starting a radio project that he also got involved with. And that's how we met. And we worked together kind of quietly for maybe 3 or 4 years, got to know each other. And then we decided radio wasn't necessarily for us. We wanted to try something different. That's my memory. What's yours, Earlonne?
No, that's pretty much it. You know, when Nigel came down, you know, she was a volunteer that, you know, cared for the individuals that was inside, you know, wanted to volunteer her time. You know, she wasn't getting paid to do none of that stuff. She just used to come in and hang out and get stuff done. And one of the things she was working on that I wasn't in that class, but I still did one of her projects was the photo mapping. It was a photo mapping class she did where you could take a picture and then just map like everything you see on the picture, you know, whether it's a car in the background, something on the ground, whatever it is. So that's how I really somewhat met Nigel, is through that media center. And again, we used to do the work for the local KLW radio station. And like I say, Nigel said, you know, she was like, I want to do something else. Long storytelling, you know.
Long form storytelling.
Long form storytelling. Yeah. I was like, okay, cool, let's do a podcast. And what I say, what is a podcast?
Yeah, exactly. I said, do you want to do a podcast? He said, yes. And then the next thing was, well, what is a podcast?
I'm in, but what is a podcast?
That's what Earlonne. He always says yes. He always says yes.
Let's figure it out later. All right.
Yeah.
That's dope. So, but you all hinted that you started in radio?
Yeah.
Tell me about that. Like,
well, I mean, that's the other thing that's weird is neither of us had a background in any kind of audio. Originally, we were talking about doing a documentary film inside the prison, because photography is my background in film. But it turned out it was so hard to get to work with film inside prison that we thought it would be easier to just do audio. Like, it really was just like, this is going to be easier. And that was pretty naive. Anyone who does audio knows that it's not easy. But in prison, it just seemed a little bit easier. And there were mechanisms down in the media lab to work. There were some recording equipment and computers. So that's how we started. And then we were lucky enough to hook up, as Earlonne mentioned, with KLW, a local and public radio station that was interested in supporting what we were doing. So they really helped train us. And they trained us enough that we knew we wanted to try something else.
Okay, all right. But you guys also talked about a contest.
Yes.
So your Brad alluded to it. So tell me about this contest that kind of that's part of Ear Hustle's origin story.
Yeah. Earlonne, you're good at this part.
Am I? No, I had to get my vibe. So so when we came, Nigel was talking about the podcast, and we was like, okay, let's do it, let's figure it out. While we was trying to figure out what we wanted to do for our first episode, Nigel came in one day and she had a brochure from PRX's Radiotopia saying, hey, we having this PodQuest competition. We looking for the next best thing. And she was like, what y'all want to do? Do y'all want to enter it? And of course, we like, yeah. You know, not having never done a podcast, we like, yeah, let's enter it. All they want is a 2-minute promo. So we worked that out for a while, got our promo together, and we submitted it. And when we ended up, well, actually, we had to get the permission from the prison itself. So being that we were already doing the radio stories for KLW, the prison was like, all right, cool, y'all, we got the format in place, so y'all can go in and submit.
Yeah,
it's way more than that, you know.
Yeah, that's it. But I should say, before we found out about the Radiotopia PodQuest, our idea for we didn't know how the podcast would be heard. We just wanted to make one, and we thought we would eventually be able to play it inside the prison, inside all the prisons in California. So we had a good idea for making the podcast. We didn't have a great idea for how we were going to actually get it outside of the prison until we heard about the Radiotopia PodQuest. But I think what that says is that we were really interested in making and being creative and finding a way to tell story, finding a way to do storytelling. That was our directive. Getting it out into the world was a secondary thing. But
and I say with that, it was more of, okay, our whole goal was only to air the podcast in San Quentin.
Yeah.
And our bigger goal was to air it in all the prisons in California.
Yeah.
That was like and then we was thinking about outside of that, but those were our two main focuses.
Yeah.
And we submitted our 2-minute piece, which was about 1 minute and 56 seconds. And we became out of 1,537 other contestants in 53 different countries. We were in the top 10. So
yeah, exactly. And
top 10, we was like, oh yeah, this is going, it's on and cracking. And then, we got narrowed down to the top 4, and then the top 4 had to do pilot episodes. So then it was like, let's figure out how to do podcasts.
Yeah.
To that point, we were still stuck. We was like, oh.
Yeah. I mean, that was, Lawrence, I think what that also says is sometimes it's better to not know how hard something's going to be. Like if you have the passion and the drive, you should just dive in, and then you're going to figure it out as you need to figure it out. Because sometimes I think you can psych yourself out thinking, oh, I got to do this, I got to do that, and you'll never get the work done. So I think in some ways we were fortunate that we had the passion and the drive, and we created a space where we could make this podcast, as we were going.
And I'm gonna say this too. So Nigel, she was approved to bring podcasts in so we can hear what podcasts were. I mean, the whole get down. So one of them was Snap Judgment. Mm-hmm. And I was hearing Glenn Washington on there. I'm like, oh, that's easy. He just talking. It's cool. We could do that, And then Glenn himself, along with Pat Mesiti-Miller and all them, they all came in just to talk to us about it, right? But then once I started looking into it, I was like, oh, they just don't set up mics and talk. They got to do editing. They got to do all kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So that's when I was like, oh, this is interesting. This is more than I thought. But
so how did you all come up with your pilot episode? Like, how did you come up with the subject?
Yeah. So Earlonne and Antoine Williams, who's also a co-creator, who is the sound designer too, for the podcast. The three of us sat down and just brainstormed. We had a whiteboard down in the media lab. We would just put all our ideas up there. And someone pointed this out to me recently. When we talk about Ear Hustle, we're very clear about what we didn't want it to be, as opposed to what we, in some ways, like what the stories we were going to do. So we knew we weren't going to tell stories about crime. We knew we weren't going to do stories that were just about policy and overtly trying to change the system. And we weren't going to do stories about the wrongfully convicted, stuff that wasn't really based on violence. And I guess, we knew we wanted to tell everyday stories, like small stories that are overlooked, and stories that would show commonalities between inside and outside people. And so that narrowed things down a little bit. And then, I think Earlonne can speak for himself. I just started thinking, what's interesting to me? Like, what do I want to know? And I figured if I wanted to know about it, other people were going to want to know about it too. But I always like to think small, like what is the smallest thing that we can investigate that's going to add up to an interesting story? And for our first 3, we knew for sure we were going to subvert expectation. Like we were going to tell stories that were funny and charming and also sad and tragic, but we were going to make sure Earlonne and I were going to be laughing at some point during every episode, because that's, I'm curious, Lawrence, what you think about this. So many people, when they think about prison, just assume everyone is angry and, pissed off all of the time. And I think that really misses the mark about that people in prison are just like people on the outside. They're going through all kinds of stuff. And so there's going to be a range of emotion in every story. And I think Earlonne, we all felt strong about that.
No, definitely. I mean, people really only mad on the basketball court when they do.
Oh,
yeah, right.
There's a riot going down. Outside of that, everybody just in their normal states, So we definitely wanted to reflect that, and I think I remember we had a story and one of them fell through, and that's when we came with the misguided loyalty. I can't remember which story fell through, but then it was one of those, we need the third story, let's go with this one. And that was like the one time I think we spoke, because it was germane to the story, we spoke to a person's crime. Yeah. And we should say the first 3 stories that we did for the pilot, we did one called Looking Out, which was about Roach, the guy inside who loves critters. And it's really a story about love and finding love and giving love. And then we did one about the SHU, the segregated housing unit, but that was really from the perspective of how that affects the 5 senses. And then we did the story about Tommy Shakur Ross, and that one did revolve around I don't know if you want to describe the crime, Earlonne, or not, but
it was about the
No,
consequences of his
it was
crime.
definitely about being involved in a gang, committing a crime, and then, retaliation of that crime, so it was like really going through Shakur's life on that one. So that was deep because, he was talking about, personal things that happened to him and his family as well. So
Yeah.
Those 3 episodes were interesting to make, very interesting,
All right. Well, it's interesting what you two were talking about what you didn't want it to be like, and Nigel, you saying that you figured if you thought something was interesting, you thought other people may think it was interesting. In my work at the Marshall Project, I have a print publication called News Inside that goes into prisons and jails across the country. So I communicate with incarcerated people a lot, and I was incarcerated myself. But I found that incarcerated people sometimes, they don't want to hear stories about prison.
Yeah.
Because they feel like I'm living it all the time. I don't want to hear it again. It's just going to stress me out. So I wonder what Earlonne was thinking about that. And this other piece is, I always thought that, stories that incarcerated people went through, the public might find that interesting, but incarcerated people might find stories that people in the public went through. They might find that interesting.
Yep.
So I was wondering how you both thought about that.
I'll say this. So like you just said, when you're living it, you're not thinking it's interesting. You know what I'm saying? But when you have a person like Nigel or someone else come in and you might just be telling them like, man, I only have 15 minutes to tell this person, I need to see you this week because this is the only phone call I get. So how do you get a person to come 500 miles in 15 minutes? You know what I'm saying? So that's interesting for people on how that went down. But for us, it's like, hey, this is what it is, And
right.
We wasn't thinking about that. So when we had Nigel brain thinking on a whole different level, like, no, that's interesting. Or that's interesting. And it's like, really?
Yeah, and Lawrence, one thing I would say, and I would have to talk to the people that you're talking to that say that, is that we're not asking them to tell the stories that are really about prison. What we're asking them to do is talk about who they are as a person. And I believe that you can get anyone to talk if you can prove to them that you really care about what they have to say and their experiences amount to something and can be engaging. So again, we're staying away from people's crimes, but if you are asked to talk about what is it like to be a father, how do you be a father from prison, or how do you stay in touch with people? How do you celebrate holidays, or what kind of creative workarounds have you found to make this tolerable? Or what is the education like that you're experiencing right now? So although it's happening in prison and it's tainted by that, it is in some ways, I guess, the unexpected. That's what I would go back to. At least that's what I would try to gently convince someone of, why they should talk to us, even if they don't want to talk about their prison experience.
And I would just say this, it's a trip because they're almost, street experiences and prison experiences are almost the same. It's just a littler environment.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? There's commonalities between both. So it's just really finding that one that is like, okay, this might work. This might work.
Yeah.
Okay. So why the title Ear Hustle? Tell me what that means.
Ear Hustle is, and you know what? It actually worked for us. You know what I'm saying? It actually worked for us. But, in prison and on the streets parlance, it's eavesdropping, listening where you shouldn't be listening, or just, minding someone else's business. What you say, Nige?
Yeah. I mean, it's basically eavesdropping, and for better or worse, I've always loved to overhear conversations. It used to be my hobby. And so it just seemed like it fit what we were doing, which was to tell stories from places where a lot of stories aren't coming out of. So giving people an opportunity to eavesdrop. I don't see it as a negative. I see it as a form of curiosity to want to hear conversations that are ones you don't normally hear. So it just seemed like for me was the perfect name for our podcast, because it's what we were doing. Yeah, and sometimes Earlonne was literally ear hustling on the yard to get stories.
You got to keep your head on the swivel and you got to stay listening.
Exactly. You know, they have a saying that art, a person composes art, but each person who listens or views it interprets what that art is. And you know, that's how I felt with Ear Hustle. When I first heard it, I was incarcerated. When I heard about Ear Hustle, and when I heard the title, I said, "Oh, this is a cool title." And they're talking about prison stories. I believe one of your stories was, I hope I'm not misquoting it, was about a kite or something like that. One of your early stories.
Yeah.
When I heard about that, I thought of people in the public just ear hustle in prison to kind of hear what's going on. And you were just giving them, you know, what's the lowdown, what's going on in prison. So that's really cool. And to take it back a bit, like ear hustling to us, I know it's the same in California. I was incarcerated in New York. Is when, like, for instance, people are in solitary confinement. They're in these long hallways, and on one side of the hallway are cells. And one person in cell 1 might be talking to cell 3, and then about something about with their family, and cell 2 just steps in. Word, your sister did that? And they said, man, stop ear hustling, man. I wasn't even talking to you. You know, that's
our conversation.
Yeah, that's like you third partying. Yeah, you know, that type of thing. So I thought that that was pretty cool. But I want to switch gears a bit. I want to talk about some exciting news you all have. Y'all have a book coming out called This is Ear Hustle. Talk about that. Why this book and why now?
Yeah. Well, writing a book was actually one of our goals for a long time. And it was, there was so much to talk about Ear Hustle. Like on the show, we really focus on the stories, not how Ear Hustle is made. And we wanted to write about kind of behind the scenes, how Earlonne got to prison, how I got to prison, how we met, how we created the partnership that we have and why it works. Because one of my underlying reasons for doing Ear Hustle is to show that people who are incarcerated and people who are not can work together as professional colleagues and nothing bad is going to happen. And I really believe that if there could be more partnerships like that, it would make a huge difference in life in prison and also build an understanding and sympathy for people to put time into trying to change the laws and getting people out of prison. So we really wanted to talk about that. We wanted to be able to do some stories that we hadn't done in the podcast, and then also talk about sort of an extended conversation about some of the stories we did and people that we talked to. And I think, you know, Earlonne also wanted the opportunity to be able to talk about the work he does outside the podcast, which is his work, you know, with trying to get rid of 3 strikes. So it was a creative challenge and an emotional challenge. And we got to do it during COVID.
Very challenging. I'll say that. You know?
How so? How so? Tell me.
I think, you know, every time, you know, when you read a book, when I read a book or read books, in my mind, somewhere in my mind, I'm saying, these are some smart ass people to organize these thoughts in this way, you know? So that's always been like you know, I was intimidated by that, you know, when it come to organizing your thoughts, to have a book to just lay out how they lay out. So when it came for us to write a book, it was more of, I think we did it in different chapters and we brought them together. So it was easier in that form, or what is it, like writing an essay about something and then bringing them together, you know? So looking at it from that point of view, it was a little easier, but it was still hard. It was me wrestling with my own thoughts, you know, because it's not my memoir, you know what I'm saying? It's a book on how we created this. So it was like, okay, I would like, say, for instance, speak about a lot about myself, and I'm like, oh, it ain't about that. You know what I'm saying? And then just stay focused on what it's about. So that was, to me, that was like the hardest thing, is staying on point.
But one of the things that was nice about the process is that we really could support each other through it. Like when one of us was like, oh my God, I can't organize this, the other was able to step in. And that's just kind of the working relationship we have with the podcast and with the book. So I found a lot of joy in doing it, honestly. And can I say I'm really proud of what we did together?
Oh, definitely. Can I say sometimes cool. I cheated writing the book. I'll go around and record myself talking and go transcribe it and look at it and be like, that was dope.
Totally. I mean, I think that's one of the things we learned from the podcast is like, you can just talk into a mic, stream of consciousness, get good stuff out, and then you edit it for the stuff that actually makes sense. So we did a lot of audio recording for the book that we transcribed and edited. And that was for us was a really good process.
Definitely.
Nice. How long did it take?
COVID,
about a year.
A year?
Wait. COVID is still going. We can't say that.
Yeah, right.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Well, shelter in place. It took us about a year. I mean, obviously we had been working on it a little bit before. I mean, I knew that we wanted to write a book and we had some stories to go back to, but I would say that we really wrote it in a year.
Yeah, about that.
Yeah.
The shelter in place helped.
Shelter in place helped. Definitely helped.
Didn't go nowhere.
Yeah.
Stuff.
And we're both pretty disciplined. So we had schedules set up for writing. We worked with a really great editor who also helped us. Yeah.
So without giving too much away, both of you got pretty personal in the book in a way that you don't do on Ear Hustle.
Yeah.
How was that like for each of you?
For me, I mean, so I think when it comes to Ear Hustle, it's more about the people that we're talking to and their stories. So it's not necessarily ours. So it was kind of, for me, going back into my past, it was fun in a way, just to go and relive that and put it on a page and see what it looked like. So I think for me, it was a little challenging, but cool. You know what I'm saying? To be able to lay it out and like, again, organize those thoughts and put it out there. So I was content, I think.
Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, for me, it was the right place to be personal. The podcast isn't, because it's not, I mean, it's my creativity that helps make the podcast, but it isn't about me. But the book seemed like the right place to talk about why I do what I do, how I got to San Quentin, what in my past made me interested in it, and some of the quixotic things that had me get to San Quentin. And I also really want an opportunity to personally talk about our relationship, how we work together and why it works so well. Again, as a way to encourage people to think about partnering, finding professional partnerships with people that you might not first think you could find that with. So I think, I'm also a teacher. And so I spend a lot of time working with people who are trying to find their creative path. And so I wanted an opportunity to talk about that in the book, the importance of believing in your own creativity and believing that you have the power to do something that is meaningful to you and hopefully meaningful to other people. So again, the book seemed like the right place. The podcast just isn't the right place to do that. Yeah. And I wanted also to celebrate, what we've done. We've worked together for a long time now. And it just seemed like the right time to say, we've got something else to say besides what we do on the podcast.
And even with that, I think it's hard for some people to put like a podcast in a book. That's one of the things that people used to tell us, like, oh, that's going to be hard. That's going to be different. That's going to be difficult. I think we did damn good. That's just me thinking
right. That's right.
Me thinking that though. I think we were able to maybe offer some stories that we haven't got around to yet on the podcast. I think we were able to. I think the Karen chapter gonna get people.
Yeah, we've got about a woman who's spent a long time with a guy in prison and what it's like to support somebody. And
I think me and Lawrence know what that's like.
Right, I know what it's like.
And I think one of the challenges was to make it different enough for the podcast so that people that know the podcast don't feel like, wait a minute, I know all of this. So hopefully people who know the podcast well, if they read the book or buy the book, will feel like they're getting a different insight or different stories.
Oh, they definitely will.
Yeah,
absolutely. Because it seems like it's building off the podcast, but in a different way, which is cool. And I should have asked you earlier, how many subscribers do you have to the podcast?
So subscribers or downloads?
Download, both.
Yeah, let's go to downloads.
If I say we're over 60 million downloads.
Oh my goodness.
That's not saying that we have 60 million subscribers.
Right.
But 60 million downloads.
And we have 5 people that listen to it a lot.
Yeah. It's a fair number.
It's hard to say. I think maybe we can look at our lowdown.
But it is over 60 million downloads, that's for sure.
And this is a podcast that you just wanted to have aired in San Quentin.
Aired in San
Broadcast in San Quentin.
60 million downloads, my commutation to get out of prison, it exceeded expectation. What was the saying at the end of
Yes,
season 9?
the reality was bigger than the dream.
Reality was bigger than the dream. Real
Yeah.
talk. That's
Yeah.
And I must ask, Earlonne, how did it feel when your sentence was commuted and the governor quoted your work from Ear Hustle?
Hey, it was, you know, it's crazy because I don't know, how can I say this? Like, I have that whole conversation that we could not use because we didn't ask for permission when I was getting my commutation. You know, I didn't ask for permission to record the call, you know, and it was a cloud nine situation. You know, you walking in there, I've never been in this part of the prison. If you go in this part of the prison, something good or bad is happening. So for me, it was something good. And to walk in there and to talk to the governor's staff, and once the business was done, they was like, we love Ear Hustle, you know, and I'm like, whoa, you know what I'm saying? Because, you know, my whole time in prison, you know, I had been, I ain't gonna say my whole time in prison, but when we created Ear Hustle, I used to hear from a lot of colleges, judges, a lot of different people in different walks of life that was like, you know, the work that you do is resonating with us out here, you know, keep it going. We love the stories. So going in there and hearing that from the governor's office and being able to call my mother a couple of minutes later to say, your baby coming home. You know, I told you it wasn't gonna be, because I mean, I don't supposed to be paroled until November of 2028. And that's not even parole. That's just going up and just, you know, showing how I've changed or whatever. That was just a parole hearing, not saying I was gonna get out.
Yeah.
You know? So
Blessing.
Yeah, to have a governor be like, man, you doing good. That was the best.
How did that make you feel, Nigel?
Oh my God. Well, you know how when you're dealing with prison stuff, you never want to get your hopes up about anything because chances are you're going to be disappointed. So the process for Earlonne getting his commutation was like a year long. So there were so many steps to it. And for a long time, I just didn't allow myself to think it could possibly happen. But as time went on, it started to seem like this is going to happen. This is going to happen. So when it did, I mean, it was incredible and exciting. And, and I also say this about it, it was also weird because we had built this whole thing in prison. Our professional lives together were in San Quentin. And when Earlonne got out, I didn't know it was going to happen. Like, I didn't know if he was going to want to be as far away as possible from prison stuff and not want to do Ear Hustle anymore. And, there was no way it would, it's our baby. If one of us left Ear Hustle, I think that would be the end of Ear Hustle. And I didn't want Earlonne to feel pressure to have to stay. But of course, in my heart, I was like, please, please, please stay. Yeah. And when he got out, I remember the day he got out, we picked him up at the prison. We went out and got breakfast and we were driving away from San Quentin. The weird thing was, it just felt like he'd always been out. You know what I mean? Like, it was so normal
that way.
And wonderful. We just slipped into our working relationship on the outside, just like it had been inside, but only better because now we could travel together. We could share meals together. We could actually taste each other's food, call each other. But after he left, when I started going back into San Quentin again, it was hard to be in there without him. I really missed him in there. And it's different now. It's still wonderful, but it's a different thing. So
I walk in there with you now.
Yeah, when you walk in there with me, it's awesome. But of course, I don't want him to be there. I love that we work on the outside, but I miss what it was like when I walked in there and we're like, yep, this is what we're going to do. It's 8 a.m. Let's get to work. And we'd work till 8 p.m. So, but we have that. I mean, I always have the memory of that.
So how did you all select the new host on Rasan New York Thomas?
So it's a lot to that. That's a loaded question there.
Lay it on me.
I'm laying on you. So we end up doing it's a trip because, when you're dealing with something, I want to say as high profile as probably Ear Hustle, and it's a lot of responsibility in the prison with, the incarcerated people around you, with the administration, with a lot of that, And so the main thing was just to have a reasonable person, a person that, won't let it go to his head, all that. So we end up doing a talent just like
I'm gonna say such. I'm
I
saying
like just like
a professional job search.
We did a professional job search, the podcast
Professional
competition, pretty much.
Yeah.
And we put out a flyer in all of the San Quentin news. They have a newspaper that go to all the incarcerated individuals. So we talked to them, had them put our flyers in their newspaper. So we had like a what do you call that, Nigel?
A resume. People had to submit a resume, a letter of intent. They had to talk about an episode that they liked and why. I mean, I tried to mirror it on the kind of job application that people have to submit when they apply for teaching. And we got maybe like 30 applications. We read through them, and then we narrowed it down to 10 people that we interviewed for the job. They came down to the media lab. We did a professional interview, and then we narrowed it down to 4 people. Geez, that sounds like the podquester, Earlonne. That had to come in. They had to pitch a story. They had to show us what they could do on the computer, and then they had to sit down and do narration with me. And it was I don't know, it was a couple months. It was a pretty long process.
But I'm gonna say this: New York was my pick from the beginning.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not that I was biased or anything. I just knew who this person was around the prison. I knew how he would be. I mean, it wasn't just ear hustle, in his own right. He's a great writer, So I knew that, me leaving and him just taking the baton was magic.
Yeah, and we needed somebody. I mean, I knew there were things that Earlonne took care of in prison to make it work that I had no idea about. Just the politics and stuff that I wasn't involved in. Like I always knew that things were going to be safe. And I don't mean like anything was going to happen to me that was dangerous. I just knew that he would keep the media lab running. He would keep the BS out. He'd keep the egos at bay, and he would just make sure that we could always work. So there had to be somebody who had that respect that Earlonne had, because he had a lot of respect in prison. So there was stuff beyond the talent. There was just personality stuff.
No, I was just going to say, and all that without being an asshole, just being me.
Exactly. Just being Earlonne.
That's right.
That's a rare quality.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I can definitely empathize with that. And I'm glad you all picked Rahsaan. He's a really good dude.
Yes,
and and he happens to be a good friend of mine, brother. And he introduced me to Rahsaan about 2.5 years ago, and him and I have been friends ever since.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, he's awesome, and he's got a wonderful laugh.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so this is a question. It's for me. This is totally off script. Okay. Now, I noticed that this new book, This Is Ear Hustle, is on Audible. So did you all do the voice? Did you read it on Audible and record it?
I'm waiting to hear it, honestly.
Yes.
We
recorded, but we didn't. What? Oh, we recorded it, but we don't do all the voices.
Oh no, we don't do the voices.
We have other people. We have some actors too. Like, I mean, I wasn't going to read like Roach's. We read our parts.
Wait, so explain that to me. You read your parts, but what parts do you not read?
So the only parts we don't read is when we're probably interviewing someone, whether it was in prison or on the streets.
Yeah.
I think a couple of individuals were available to read their own parts. That was a society. And for those that they couldn't reach out to or it just didn't work, they had some voice actors come through and read for them. And we had to sit back and listen to a lot of people to see, do this person somewhat sound like this person, same cadence, same.
Yeah.
So it was interesting.
Multiple voices.
What did it was like 4 days?
Yeah, it took us a week to do it. I mean, it's our voices, yes, mixed in with some actors when we're doing the interviews. And I'm going to tell you, it was really hard. Recording audiobook is. I thought it, because we do the podcast, it wouldn't be so difficult. Oh man, I was tense the whole time.
Getting the cadence right.
Getting the cadence right. Reading, page after page after page. I'm also dyslexic, so reading for me out loud is not a walk in the park. But I think it came out well. And we wanted it to have that same, like the camaraderie and the way we interact. We really wanted that to come across on the page and not just sound like we were reading. So we wanted it to sound spontaneous. And I hope it does. I mean,
what was his book? Just Mercy, Brian Stevens. I hope it sounded like that. Because he was talking to me in the car. I'm just rolling and he talking to me and telling me a story. So I hope it's on that level.
I hope so. But there are some voices that people are going to recognize, like Lieutenant Sam Robinson reads a part in it. And a couple other people that have been on the podcast do their voices too that are out. So that was neat.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Excellent. I'm glad you all talked with me about this today. I mean, I'm a Audible listener. I have the book. I started reading the book, but I also want to download it on Audible.
Totally.
But Audible is not available until I think the 14th or the 15th. But your book comes out on the 12th, so it's not available.
It was supposed to come out on the 12th. So due to COVID, all the books are backed up 1 week. So it comes out the 19th now.
Yeah, the 19th, which is fine. It's only a week. Yeah, for now. Yeah, Lawrence, you have to tell us the difference if you listen to it, what you think, if we sound okay.
Definitely, because like Earlonne, I listen to it in my car.
Best place to listen.
Oh, that's the best place. That's them long trips. When I'm going back and forth from the Bay to LA, that's when I get all my book listening in and all that.
That's right. All right, so now I want to give the audience some time to shine. They have some questions.
Okay.
So, you know what? I'm going to start with a lighthearted question. This is one from Katie. This is for you, Earlonne. She says, "What you eating these days?"
So I made some tacos yesterday, and I had a lot of that. What is that? Pico de gallo. I had a lot of that stuff left, and the turkey meat and all that. So I made me a nice turkey omelet with all kind of stuff in it, and bacon. And you getting hungry, Nigel? And orange juice, and the works. You know what I'm saying? For dinner, I might have me a shrimp burrito, Nigel.
Oh, wow.
A shrimp burrito with the nice shrimps, and it's gonna be hooked up.
Yeah.
And I might have a beer with it, Nigel.
Oh, man.
Nigel, for you, I'm gonna have some Chardonnay with it.
Thank you. La crema?
Well, hold on. I'm gonna ask Nigel what she's eating as if I don't know. What you eating?
Yeah, I'm having 3 ounces of ground beef with about 2 ounces of pinto beans, another bean dish, 4 ounces of corn, and a 6-inch tortilla, and a vitamin C fortified drink.
That's horrible.
Love Nigel's solidarity.
Yeah.
Why are you doing this?
Yes. So
solidarity and empathy.
Yes. So we are doing on Ear Hustle what we're calling the 30-day challenge, where people on the team, and actually one guy who's in San Quentin, are trying to follow some of the rules and regulations of life inside San Quentin. So for 30 days, we are eating a prison diet at the times when you eat inside. Actually, I'm late for dinner. We have to get up at certain times. We have to eat this diet. We're following a prison workout, doing our clothes the way you do in prison, which is in a bucket. Yeah, all stuff like that. So I'm going into my second week of this very carb laden diet, which I know you both know well. It's tough.
I had some candy or some food right now.
Earlonne, I know. Earlonne did to me yesterday when we were working. He put an empty candy bar wrapper in my bag, thinking I would get busted for cheating, but I found it. I did not cheat.
Hey, I got all the tricks of the trade. It's now starting. I was waiting on them to get into it.
Yeah.
Oh man, it reminds me of a trick I read in the book, but I am not gonna mention it. Right in the beginning, the Earlonne trick.
Oh, yeah.
You have to read it. Okay. How has the show evolved since you came home, Earlonne?
Well, when I was inside, our stories were mainly in San Quentin Prison,
100%.
But once I was released and on parole, there was a whole nother world. You dealing with formerly incarcerated cats, cats reintegrating back into society and getting acclimated back to things. So that was definitely some topics that we talked about in season 4 and season 5 and to this day.
Yeah, and going into other prisons. Now we've gone into prisons outside of San Quentin, which I suppose we could have. I didn't want to do it when Earlonne was in San Quentin. And we travel now to do stories, which we couldn't do before. And so that really just opens up the landscape. It's really exciting.
And we was able to go into a women's prison, but as soon as we went into the women's prison to doing the story, COVID hit.
Yeah.
Hey, so that was like, that's the whole, that's the whole thing, to bring more women voices into Ear Hustle. So
what women's facility?
we went into Folsom's women's facility.
Okay.
Yeah.
Forward to
Even though they had a women's facility in Folsom, I was like, really?
Looking forward to hearing that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. We're supposed to be going to California Women's Institute in November.
Oh, yes.
CIW?
California Institute
for Women, we hope.
Yeah, definitely. Just trying to, get our boots on the ground in there and tell, their stories. Let them tell their own stories, because it's very interesting. I have a lot of formerly incarcerated friends, and we talk about a lot of things, and I'll be like, ooh, that's good.
I know. So do I. Formerly incarcerated women, they have some good stories to tell.
Yes. Great stories.
Yeah, absolutely. And they don't get enough airplay as much as the men. So
they don't. They don't.
Until Ear Hustle.
Until Ear Hustle.
We haven't even done that yet. We're trying. We're
getting there. We're getting there.
Okay, this next question is from Susan Ritter. This is for you, Earlonne, again. Do you think you will write a memoir?
At some point. Maybe in the next few years. I just turned 50. What was that? A couple of months ago. In a few years, I don't have enough street experience as an adult to write a memoir.
Okay.
I need some more street experience. As an adult, I technically only have. I'm 50. I only have like 5 years of adult street experience.
Wow.
Now 3 years, and prior I was out 2 years, so yeah, since I was 17, I only have 5 free years, which is why I could not do the 30-day challenge.
I understand. I totally understand. So, Nigel, this is from Lori Day. Can you talk about the obstacles you had in getting all the gatekeepers on board with this?
Ooh, yes. So working inside a prison is really difficult if you're, anyone working inside a prison. So it takes a lot of time. And I knew that. So before we even started Ear Hustle, I spent almost 2 years just going into the prison, volunteering, getting to know the administration, getting them an opportunity if they wanted to get to know me and trust me. And you just have to be, I always tell this to people, you have to be patient, polite, and persistent. If you are an outsider trying to work in a prison, nothing happens on outside time. So you've got to be patient about that. You have to be super polite, because if you lose your temper, you just get shut down. Nobody cares. But at the same time, you have to be really persistent and keep going back and asking and biding your time and making yourself appear useful. So I mean, really, it is about time. You need to put a couple of years aside just to get a lay of the land and to begin to understand how complex it is inside prison. So what helped me was volunteering, going in as a volunteer and getting to know people that way. But everything inside is a challenge. Trying to get something printed, there's no printers anywhere. It's very hard. Like today, I just sit at my desk and I print out whatever I need. But sometimes inside it could take like 2 hours for us to find a way to print a script out, or find a way to transfer audio from one computer to another so we could get it cleared. It is all, I guess, all about persistence. So that's what I would say. Time and persistence, and not getting frustrated. I don't know any other workaround. I mean, people tell me, I want to go and start doing stories. I'm like, well, do you have about a year at least to set it up? No. I'm like, you're not, forget it.
Yeah.
Ain't gonna happen.
Okay. My next question is from Sharon Pines. She wants to know, is San Quentin unique in its variety of program it offers to incarcerated people? Are there any other states that have audio labs and newspapers and that sort of thing in the way that San Quentin does?
Yeah. It's that's a hard question. I can say off the top of my head, I know that Angola in Louisiana is one that has a magazine. San Quentin is kind of unique. We always call it the flagship of rehabilitation based on the opportunities. And those opportunities exist because San Quentin is in the middle of a few different towns, whether it's Oakland, San Francisco, Marin, it's in the middle of stuff. So people pass it every day. most prisons are somewhere you will never see, you know. So I think San Quentin do have a lot of opportunities that other prisons probably definitely need to have, you know, because I think if individuals have no opportunities, they get involved, you know. So yeah, I do think it's unique.
Yeah, I mean, from my going to other prisons and talking to people, I think it is definitely unique. There's obviously are other prisons that are doing newspapers and doing more radio. And we've had people from prisons outside of California who work for the different prison administrations contact us about how they can start a podcast. So I know other prisons are interested in it, but San Quentin does seem to have an exceptionally large number of programs that are run by volunteers. So it really, in a lot of ways, feels more like a college campus in that way, you know, in that way only, that there's a lot of things you can do. And again, I mean, that's something that should be happening in a lot of other prisons, but prisons that are in the middle of nowhere, you know, it's really hard for people to go there and start programs.
And I'll say this, look, man, I was locked up 14 years before I got to San Quentin. And when I got to San Quentin is the first time I really sat in a restorative justice group, you know, and really sat down with survivors of crime and law enforcement and whomever else and had those, you know, profound conversations that was eye-opening, you know, even though my mindset was straight on, you know, I'm good. I ain't, you know, when I get out, it's a wrap. I'm gonna live the regular life. But I think sometimes you need to just sit down with people that was on the opposite side of whether it was that gun or whatever it was, you know, and have those deep dialogues, you know, and it really, you know, like I always say, you know, you feel like shit after those conversations because you find yourself asking yourself like, man, what was I on? You know,
Right.
I get, you know, distracted like that or sent on that path. So I think, yeah, San Quentin is totally different.
Absolutely. And from my personal experience, I agree with you all. I visit many facilities across the country, and San Quentin is certainly the flagship. I saw they have the First Watch program. They had
Yeah.
tripods hanging on the wall. And in my experience, no prison can have tripods hanging on the wall for a video camera. And people have video cameras in the yard. You have the podcast. You have the San Quentin News, a real newsroom with editors. My experience, that hasn't happened. But I always say that Sing Sing in New York, they have a plethora program, not as much as San Quentin, but they have the college, they have the theater, where individuals have these elaborate sets. They put on these costumes and they perform like they're really in theater, and it's really a beautiful thing. They also have Carnegie Hall's Music Combia, but it's all programs that happen inside, never something that's broadcasted on the outside.
No, definitely. And I always tell people like that's the biggest thing right there. I used to always tell Nigel and other volunteers that, you know, the volunteers are on the front line of public safety. You know what I'm saying? Because they assist in changing the mindset, you know, and like even with Ear Hustle, one of Nigel's main things was to be like, listen, it's more of us working as colleagues, not that you incarcerated them on the street. We're colleagues while we're doing this. Yeah. So, right. You know, it was just breaking those type of barriers because you always have, oh, we're staff and you're, how they say it, an inmate, you know, you're an incarcerated person, whatever it is, you know, and it wasn't really, it was like that, but it wasn't really like that at all.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I have another question from somebody, Kerry C wants to know, how do incarcerated people listen to the show?
So so in California, it's streamed from the headquarters to all the prisons. In other states, some people download what we do and take it into their prisons. It's in transcript form, so you know we've had people in different countries reading transcripts of it.
Yeah,
and I think it's a trip because we were broadcast in 112 states in London. No, 112 prisons in the UK before our stuff was aired in California prison.
Yeah. It's true. So in California, it's easy by prison standards because, as Earlonne said, it's broadcast by the headquarters. Other prison, it was being played in a prison in Illinois. I think it was in Illinois and Alabama. Someone from another prison has to be interested And if they contact us, we give them all the audio, and then they figure out how to, it's available for anyone who wants it, but they've got to get the administration on board to play it. Like, we don't deal with that part, but we will give audio to anyone who wants it. So there was a time when we were pushing that. We've just gotten too busy, but we do put it out there. If anyone volunteers in a prison or works in a prison and they want your hustle, just let us know and we'll get you all the files. And a lot of prisons have that kind of closed circuit TV station where they can play audio.
And I think remember what was the guy from Indiana?
Yeah.
Bartley? I remember he came in, he said, man, if some people in my prison would have came to me and said, we want to do a podcast, I would have just balled it up and threw it in the trash. He said, when I heard Ear Hustle, I'm reconsidering.
Yeah, that he came out to visit.
Wow,
Figure out how to do. Yeah. He actually came out to California to meet with us to see if they could start a program in he was the head of corrections in Illinois.
No, in Indiana.
Oh, Indiana.
And I mean,
the other eye.
Yeah, because of course, the lived experience got something to say. Like, it's not like we don't have a contribution to make. We change our lives. We get it. We understand. So definitely have the lived experience at the table.
That's right. That's right. Okay, my next question is from Kristen Weinberg. She says, I'm curious to know what items can be sent to prisons to help incarcerated people. We are considering paperback books. Do you have other suggestions?
Well, paperback books are great, letter writing campaigns are great, it's whatever you can send into a prison. Different prisons vary, on what individuals can have. I don't know.
There's a lot of restrictions.
I don't know if it's an individual thing or a group thing, but I would definitely say tap in with those community resource individuals that are at prisons, and they'll definitely give you the rundown on how to either volunteer or donate stuff to prisons.
Yeah, but good books, right? I mean, good books that.
Make sure one of them is Ear Hustle book.
But do make sure every prison has different rules on what can be sent in. But I mean, one of the things that's nice about Ear Hustle is a lot of the people that have been in the stories end up getting letters from listeners. And it always seems to me that people inside love getting mail. Getting a letter and knowing someone's thinking about you is gold.
That was the funniest thing. I used to always talk about, like, having real problems, like street problems, wanting street problems, because you don't have no problems in prison, really. And I think writing letters was one, right? So, you have your family and a couple of friends that write you. You might get a letter or two every week. We started Ear Hustle. I was like, man, I can't keep up with this. There was too many letters coming in from too many different people around the world. I was like, whoa, I got problems.
Good problems. Well, I add to that, answering that question. You can always send news inside. That's a print publication, the Marshall Project.
Definitely.
And definitely send that. Award-winning journalism, and it's free. If you email me, I'll send you 1 million copies if you ask for it. The goal is to send it to every incarcerated person in the country, and I'll put my email in the chat.
Oh, that's nice.
It's cool.
Indeed.
All right. And now this will be my final question. I hate to end this, but I love talking to you too. I could talk to you two forever.
Great. Back at you.
It's over. This hour went by so quick. Chris Belden said, until the pandemic hit, I ran a creative writing workshop at a maximum security prison here in Connecticut. How important do you consider opportunities for artistic expression for incarcerated people? How does it affect their lives inside?
Let me ask it. I'm going to answer this from I don't know about all prisons in all states, but I can tell you California prisons are heavily segregated by race, and creative writing, acting, all that type of stuff bring races together, because you be in a classroom and you feed off each other. You have these conversations that you probably would like to have on the yard, but you're on the yard, you're in front of whomever you in front of. So when you have spaces like creative writing and stuff like that, it's definitely a plus, because you're able to break down barriers that you can't break down no other way.
It's huge. I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of the person who asked, but that is amazing, important work to be doing. Creative work anywhere, inside prison or outside prison, is so important to get people's minds flourishing and when you create something that comes from within, it's a way of saying that you're interested in yourself and you matter. It's a beautiful expression of being. So I think it's one of the most important things that happens in prison is to let people know that they are creative beings and they have something to share.
Hey, look at Ear Hustle.
Yeah.
That's right. Here's Brad. Hey, Brad.
Hey, Brad.
Guys, tremendous discussion. Great moderating, Lawrence. And
Yes.
Nigel and Earlonne, what an inspiring story. I mean, you've done so much to illuminate what life is really like in prison, the humor and humanity, not just the tough and hard part. And listening to the two of you talk, your enthusiasm for what you do and why you do it comes through. And it's certainly been clear in the podcast and now the book.
Thank you.
To everyone watching, thanks for tuning in. A reminder that in the chat column, you can find a link for purchasing copies of This is Ear Hustle. From all of us here at Politics and Prose, stay well and well read.